Shalom Mashpaka, welcome to part 2 of the prophetic order, Genesis 3:15 before Genesis 2:24. Right, so I stopped on this slide in part 1, so if you have missed it, all right, please listen to part 1 in order to understand part 2. So I'll continue, and there's a continuation of the same slide, polygamy refutation woven into the whole narrative. All right, so the examples of domestic collapse tied to polygamy. All right, Second Samuel chapter 13, Amnon rapes Tamar, family devastation follows. Second Samuel 15 to chapter 18, Absalom's rebellion and the flight of David. 1 Kings chapter 1, Adoniah's attempt to seize the throne, succession instability. So these episodes show the violent and disordering consequences in polygamous royal households. Kings must not multiply wives or wealth. Solomon disobeyed, his many wives turned his heart to foreign mighty ones. His origins were from Bathsheba. He was actually the uh, son uh, of Torah to Uriah. So his name Uriah's name is called upon Solomon, if you see, okay, ideally, and that's the reason Yahuah makes a call out each time Bathsheba is mentioned, the wife of Uriah, right? And David's household failures required Nathan's prophetic correction and Elohim's covenant promise. Polygamy in royal context is covenant corruption, judgment, prophetic reordering, eventual messianic restoration. All right. So when I say Nathan's prophetic correction, I mean that as soon as David sinned, Yahuwah ensured that he sent his prophet Nathan to tell him what is going to befall his household. All right, because of what he has sinned, what he has done in secret will be done openly, and we see that in multiple times of his sons, all right, disobeying and showing rebellion because he put seed into multiple wives and had polygamous wives, and through them he had children, and they all wanted the throne. So what a terrible situation to be in. So Torah on polygamy, not permission but damage control. Torah never commanded polygamy. Every law about it is a restriction showing it was never ideal. Exodus 21 verses 10 cannot diminish a first wife's rights, implies polygamy and harms the first wife. Deuteronomy 17:17, the king shall not multiply wives. Yahuwah explicitly commands one wife for kings. Solomon violates this and falls. Deuteronomy 21:15 to 17, laws about the hated wife. Polygamy automatically produces hatred and favoritism. Yahuwah regulates the damage, not endorses the practice. Uh, Wherever Torah regulates sin, it's not approval. All right. So this is what we need to keep in mind. So now let's see seeds in multiple wombs. Let's see examples of Abraham, Ishmael, and the problem of multiple seed lines. So putting seed into multiple wombs produced rival seed lines and rebellion against the promised seed. Abraham's concubine seed Ishmael persecuted the promised seed Isaac. Abraham legally separated the concubine seed from the promised line, showing Elohim's covenant priority for one chosen seed. So polygamy or concubinage produces competing seed lines. The presence of a secondary seed, Hagar, Ishmael, set the stage for rivalry with the promised seed, Ishak. So, Abraham's action, when conflict arose, Abraham obeyed the painful separation, sending Hagar and Ishmael away to protect the covenant promise through Ishak. This is an early pattern of Elohim preserving the covenant line. Point 3, persecution by the concubine seed. Ishmael uh, and his descendants become a persecuting presence to the promised seed, illustrating how multiple womb seeds can bring persistent hostility, typological of later rivalries. Elohim's mercy plus boundary. Even though sent away, Hagar, Ishmael receive Elohim's watchful mercy and a future promise, but they are not the covenant line of blessing. The promise remains with its check. Prophetic lesson: the prophetic ideal is a single covenant seed through whom blessing flows. Multiple seed lines introduce strife that must be redressed by covenant order. Genesis 16 to 4. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. And Sarai said to Abraham, behold, now Yahuah has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave, perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abraham had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, sent her servant, Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. Genesis 21 to 14. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not be heir with my son Ishak. The matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But Elohim said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Ishak shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Uh, Let us see about Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim, Jacob's wives, and the rivalry born from polygamy. So, polygamy in the patriarchal household produced sibling rivalry, betrayal, and later national consequences. Joseph's marriage and the adoption of Manasseh and Ephraim show Elohim's mercy in foreign soil, but their descendants and the mixed remnant are later judged for covenant unfaithfulness. Jacob's multiple wives, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, created rival seed lines and jealousy that culminated in Joseph being sold. So, Potipharah, whose daughter was Asenath, all right, was given to Joseph by Pharaoh, and from her he had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay, and both were born on foreign soil in Egypt. There was no covenant seed. We already saw covenant seed for him to take from as a wife. So Elohim incorporates foreign soil seed into the covenant blessing, as we read. All right. Elohim's mercy plus future judgment. Though Joseph's sons are adopted into the covenant blessing, their descendants, Manasseh and Ephraim, later fall into covenant unfaithfulness and suffer captivity. The mercy did not remove responsibility to keep covenant faithfulness. Jacob's polygamy origin: Jacob loved Rachel but was deceived into marrying Leah. The rivalry between Leah and Rachel and the maidservants Bilhah and Zilpah produced competing wombs and rival sons, resulting hatred and crime. The sibling rivalry, birthed by multiple wombs, led to Joseph being hated and sold by his brothers, an example of family fracturing that echoes through national history. Prophetic pattern: Elohim often uses foreign soil and surpassing adoptions as Joseph's sons to preserve the covenant seed, but the human damage of polygamy, rivalries, or envy still produces long term national wounds. Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 to 8. Rachel and Leah give maid servants to Jacob. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children, or I shall die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in Elohim's stead, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? She said, behold, my servant Bilhah, go into her, that she may bear upon my knees, and I too may have children by her. So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, Elohim has judged me, and has also heard my voice and has given me a son. Therefore, she called his name Dan. And Leah saw that she stopped bearing, and she took Zilpah, her servant, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Reuben went in the days of his youth and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" And Rachel said, "Therefore he shall lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." So see the rivalry between them. All right, so polygamy. This slide is continued. Okay. Uh, Genesis 37:18 to 28. The brothers conspire and sell Joseph when they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits and say, 'A fierce animal has devoured him.' Then we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him uh, out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, there was no water. Then they sat down to eat bread, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Yahudah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. So you see here how Leah's sons, they conspired against uh, Rachel's son, Joseph, and Benjamin was not yet born. I'm sorry, Benjamin was, probably not yet born at that time. So they conspired and they sold him. Okay, he was born much later, and Rachel, when she was going on the way to Ephrath, she bore Benjamin and she died as she was bearing him. Okay, so yeah, let me just confirm. I'm sorry, Benjamin was too small, I believe. Yeah, he was born because Rachel had already died. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sell Joseph. So I'm sorry about that. Yes, Benjamin was with his father, and he would have been a tiny tot by then when Joseph was sold. Because later on, when he's revealed to Joseph in Mitzrayim, all right, Joseph, gives him 5 changes of garments. Let's not get into that. I request you to read these, scriptures. Genesis 41 verses 45, where Joseph is given Asenath, and from him were born, these two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay, which is mentioned in Genesis 50 verses 50 to 52. Genesis 41 50 to 52, and Genesis 48 verses 5 and 6 and 8 to 20, where Jacob adopts Joseph's sons and says that your sons are as mine, and they are brought into the 12 tribes. Okay, and as a double portion, which we will see a little bit later. Now coming to Yahudah and Tamar, covenant wives seeking Elohim's forbearance and the final remedial work of Yahusha. Okay, so uh, Genesis 3:15 to Genesis 2:24. So human polygamy repeatedly caused moral failure and rival children. Yahudah, Tamar rivals in Abraham's house, Jacob's household. Despite the father's failures, Yahuwah patiently preserves the covenantal line, calling all to repentance, finally redeeming the woman through Yahusha, uh, Genesis 3:15 fulfill first, then Genesis 2:24 who restores the wife and heals the broken covenant order. Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda's misconduct seeking a prostitute leads to incest with Tamar, unwitting, producing Peretz and Zerah, but Yahuwah chooses Peretz as the covenant line, the messianic line, showing Elohim can use even broken circumstances to preserve the promise. So unknowingly, he kept the Torah of the dead brother, all right, by putting his seed into Tamar's womb. But he was morally evil, if you can see here. He was seeking a prostitute. Levirate brother law echo Tamar situation ties to Torah's concern for lineage, Deuteronomy 25, and Yehuda's failure to give Shelah obligated duty led to corrective action. Elohim still secures the line through Tamar's righteous claim. Pattern of chosen seed from flawed fathers. Abraham sent a servant to fetch a bride from the covenant kin for Yitzhak, Genesis 24. Jacob fled to mother's family for Rachel, Genesis 28 and 29 chapters. These show the norm. Wives should be taken from covenant seed, not from foreign cults. Fourth point, cultural polygamy corrupts covenant order. Laban's polygamy and the practice of handmaid wife slips covenant fidelity. The household culture of multiple wombs promotes rivalry and social wreckage. Elohim's forbearance. Yahuwah winked at sinners of the fathers for a time. He preserved lines despite failure, but calls now for repentance. He works through correction like Nathan, and covenant promises Davidic covenant. So if you understand Luke chapter 3 genealogy, I've touched base this in my previous studies that Yahuwah chose Neri from Nathan, another son of David, like to build Solomon's house because Solomon's line was corrupted. Messianic solution, order of operations, Yahusha's mission. First fulfill Genesis 3:15, break serpent's head, Redeemer, then fulfill Genesis 2:24, restore marriage, the bridegroom. Redemption precedes marriage. The woman must be cleansed before being united as wife. Final restoration, Yahusha, the true husband, redeems by bruising the serpent, then takes the bride, one wife, ending polygamous covenant chaos and restoring covenant order. Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 to 10, the Levirate law brief. It states, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside to a stranger. Husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of husband's brother to her. Genesis 24 verses 1 to 9, Abraham sent servant to find a wife for Yitzhak. The selected opening verses, I'll be reading selective passages. Now Abraham was old, advanced in years, and Yahuwah had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by Yahuwah, the Elohim of heaven and Elohim of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but will go to my country and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Yitzhak. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. In Genesis 28 1 to 5, Jacob sent to mother's family to get a wife. Then Ishak called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May Elohim Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give you the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that Elohim gave to Abraham. Genesis 3:15, Redeemer first. And I will put enmity between sorry, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Redeemer first, then Genesis 2:24 second in marriage. Second is marriage. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Okay, now let me quickly touch base upon Psalm 78 verses 9 to 11, where it talks about Ephraim turned back in battle. So the core claim is, in spite of polygamy and multiple wombs, Yahuah in his wisdom kept the covenanted line in switching over on mergers using Torah commands of the Torah of a dead brother redemption when one lineage was corrupted. Okay, the scriptures I'll read out Psalm 78 verses 9 to 11. The children of Ephraim, armed bowmen, turned back in the day of battle. Verse 10, they did not guard the covenant of Elohim, and they refused to walk in his Torah. Verse 11, and they forgot his deeds and his wonders which he had shown them. So Ephraim made firstborn. We know Jacob, he crossed his hands blessing and made Ephraim the firstborn. Ephraim becomes the head of the northern tribes, the custodian of worship in the north, the double portion inheritor through Joseph. The tabernacle is placed in Shiloh, which is Ephraim's territory. Ephraim later becomes a prophetic line for the entire northern kingdom. Point number two, Psalms chapter 78 opening judgment focuses entirely on forgetting the covenant, turning back, forsaking the place of worship which is at Shiloh. Why? Because the first one custodian failed. Point number three, the sword and the bow. Jacob tells Joseph, I have given you one portion above your brethren which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. All right, we can read this in Genesis 48:22. So there is no recorded war of Jacob with the Amorites. So the statement is prophetic. The actual war took place as recorded in Numbers 21. It was against Sichon, king of the Amorites, whose land Keshbon was taken and given to Reubenites. So we'll read a few passages, Numbers 21 verses 23 to 25. But Sichon would not allow Yasharel to pass through his border. So Sichon gathered all the people together and went out against Yasharel in the wilderness. And he came to Yakats and fought against Yasharel. And Yasharel struck him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land from the Arnon to Yabok, as far as the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of Ammon was strong. Verse 25, and Yasharel took all these cities, and Yasharel dwelt in all the cities of the Amorites, in Keshbon and in all its villages. So Numbers 21 passage was actually when which happened in the days of Moses, right, when they were crossing over Yarden, right, that's where they made war with Sichon, the king of Amorites. So then why does Jacob say that, he tells Joseph in his while blessing him, saying that I've given you one portion above my brethren, above your brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. So it is very interesting because if you read Psalms 78 verses 9, it says, the children of Ephraim, armed bowmen, all right, with the bow, turned back in the day of battle. Okay. And why? What is Jacob saying? He is speaking as Yasharel, the future nation. So this is prophetic, which we read Genesis 48:22, where Jacob is telling Joseph, I have given you one portion above your brethren, which I took out of the hand of Amorite with my sword and my bow. Is prophetic. He's speaking as Yasharel because he was renamed as Yasharel. Thus the sword and the bow belongs to Ephraim, who was the firstborn. Remember, he was incorporated into as Manasseh into being Jacob's own sons, so right, out of the 12 tribes, and with a portion one more than his brethren. All right, that makes it 13 tribes. Okay, Ephraim is prophetically the armed tribe. So Psalm 78 verses 9 deliberately references bowmen, a direct callback to Genesis 48:22. Psalm 78 verses 9 is echoing the prophetic identity of Ephraim, armed with the bow but turning back. Okay, So there is no recorded war of Yaakov with Amorites, so the statement is prophetic. So the actual war took place during the time of Moses, when war was made with Sichon, the king of Amorites. Let's move on. This slide is continuation of the previous one. Why was the firstborn blessing passed to Joseph? Because Reuben lost his firstborn right. It did not go to any other son of Lee. Remember, Reuben was the firstborn of Lee, the first son of Jacob, all right, through Lee. So he lost his firstborn right because he went up to his father's bed and slept with Bilhah, all right, which is why he lost his firstborn right, and that right was passed to the firstborn of Rachel, whom Jacob loved. All right, it was not given to any other son of Lee. So it could have gone to the second son of Lee, but instead it went to uh, Rachel's firstborn, who's Joseph, whom Jacob loved. And Jacob loved Joseph more than all his sons. Remember, he made a robe of many colors. So Joseph receives the double inheritance. Joseph becomes two tribes, Ephraim plus Manasseh. Therefore, Ephraim is the firstborn heir of Yasharal's northern destiny. When Ephraim fails, the whole north fails. This is the framework of Psalms chapter 78. Shiloh, point number 5, the falling of Ephraim's custodial. The tabernacle was placed in Shiloh for over 300 years. This is Ephraim's sacred trust. Psalm 78 narrates the sequence. Ephraim turned back, verse 9 in Psalm 78, forgot his covenant, verse 10 to 11. They provoked him, verse 17 to 31. Shiloh forsaken, verse 60. You may read all these verses, right? Ephraim rejected, verse 67. Yehudah chosen, verse 68 to 70. So the chapter is deliberately structured to show Ephraim's failure, Shiloh's rejection, and Yehudah's elevation. So Shiloh, the falling of Ephraim's custodial role. The core claim: Ephraim became a custodian of northern tribes' worship, battle, and leadership. He represented the 10 tribes of Yasharal. So Genesis 49, the two messianic streams. Jacob gives two distinct prophetic lines from Yehudah: scepter, ruler, staff, king, Messiah as lion; from Joseph: shepherd, stone, the anointed one strengthened by the mighty one of Jacob; the Ben Porath, which is the branch, the son Porath is the branch, right? So we see this perfectly from scripture because Joseph is tied to the shepherd, uh, John chapter 10, who is Yahushua HaMashiach himself. Joseph is tied to the stone anointed at Bethel. Right, remember, Jacob sees the dream and at Bethel, and he sees a ladder stretched out to heaven, and angels of or messengers of Elohim ascending and descending on that ladder, which Yahusha himself claims that John chapter 1 verses 51, from henceforth you will see heaven opened and the messengers of Elohim ascending and descending on the son of Adam, that is himself. So when Jacob wakes up from his dream, he anoints that stone on where he keeps it as a pillow at night, on which he sees a dream, and he says this is the gateway of heaven. Therefore, he names the place Bethel. Formerly, it was Luz, so he names it as Bethel, which means house. Beth means house, and El means house of Elohim. Okay, and this blessing is given to Joseph. Can you see how beautiful it is? All right, Jacob gives the blessing of the shepherd and the stone. Thus, the two messianic strands are king Yehudah plus shepherd and stone Yosef. This is key for understanding Bethlehem or Bethlehem Ephrathah. Genesis 49 verses 10, the scepter shall not turn aside from Yehudah, nor an inscriber from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him is the obedience of peoples. Verse 24, but his, that is Joseph's, bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. So if you can see here again, the bow is mentioned over here. Okay. Ruth, the divine merger of Yehudah and Ephraim. I've touched base upon this before as well. All right. So Reubenites, the core claim is Reubenites restored from the womb when Yehudah and Ephraim became one. Numbers 21 verses 26. For Heshbon was the city of Sikon, the sovereign of the Amorites, who had fought against the former sovereign of Moab and had taken all his land from his hand as far as the Arnon. Remember, we read in Genesis 48:22, where Jacob, when he blesses Joseph, he says, I've given you a portion more than your brothers, with the uh, sword and the bow which I took against the Amorites, isn't it? So if you see over here, all right, this land, the Keshbon, all right, which the war which took place much later during Moses' time, all right, they take away Keshbon from Sikon, sovereign of Amorites, okay, which who fought against the former sovereign of Moab and had taken all his land from his land as far as Arnon. That's the reason Ruth is termed as a Moabitess, because she was from this land from a geographical perspective. Not that she was a from Moab, but she was a Reubenite, because Keshbon was given to Reuben. So Ruth is from Moab geographically, which historically sits in the territory connected with Reuben, that is Keshbon. Ruth marries Machlon, an Ephrathite. After his death, she is redeemed by Boaz, also an Ephrathite of Yehuda, because Machlon dies childless. Okay, and Ruth is without a child, is redeemed by Boaz, who's a close relative of Elimelech. Thus the prophetic stream merged. Reuben lost firstborn to Ephraim, received firstborn to Yehuda, received kingship, all joined through the union of Boaz and Ruth, producing Obed, Ishai, David, the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Yehuda. When you read in Samuel, I think it's in 1 Samuel 17, if I'm not mistaken, it talks about David was the son of that uh, Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Yehuda, whose name was Ishai. All right, so David is identified both as an Ephrathite as well as an Yehudite. Bethlehem is called Ephrathah because it carries the Ephraim uh, Joseph inheritance within Yehuda's territory. David is literally a Yehudite who carries the Ephraimite identity, all right, as an Ephrathite. So this fulfills the prophetic necessity, the shepherd stone Joseph line and the scepter line, Yehuda line, join in David to Messiah. And remember, Messiah is also said in Micah chapter 5, I think verses 2, if I'm not mistaken, talks about him coming forth from Bethlehem of Ephrathah, Bethlehem of Ephrathah, Yehuda. Okay, so it all ties up. All three seeds are merged together. Ruth, Reubenitis, now after marrying Machlon, an Ephrathite, as well as a Yehudite. Now she's both, she's in fact all three, if you see, because all three were promised the firstborn blessing, right? So Reuben, by natural descent, lost it, but received it in through the womb of Ruth, in the divine merger of Yehuda and Ephraim. What a beautiful plan of Yahuah. In spite of multiple seeds, polygamy, uh, Satan trying to corrupt the seed, Yahuah in his wisdom preserved the covenantal seed. So amazing, and it's all because of his love for us. So the restoration of Reuben through Ruth. Reuben, this is the Paleo Hebrew. Reuben means see a son. So Reuben's name actually means see a son. Ru means see, uh, Ben is son. All right. So when Leah named Reuben, she prophesied beyond herself. Reuben means see a son. At the natural level, she meant, see, I have borne my husband a son. But at the prophetic level, Reuben's lost firstborn legacy would one day be restored by a son, the messianic son who comes through Bethlehem. Point number two, Reuben's fall, Genesis 35:22. He went up to his father's bed, spiritual adultery, loss of the firstborn right. But prophecy does not leave the tribe eternally disinherited, it promises a future restoration through a son. So this is a continuation of Ruth, the divine merger of Yehuda plus Ephraim. All right, first I'll read from the right and left hand side to the right hand side. Point number three, Ruth, the Reubenite womb that would be redeemed. When she married Machlon and Ephrathite, she became Reuben. Ephraim, Joseph linked by marriage, but Machlon died without seed. Her womb was empty, symbolizing the tribal failure of Reuben, the lost firstborn line, the inability to produce rightful inheritance. This is exactly the condition emissary Shaul speaks of. She shall be saved in childbearing. 1 Timothy 2 verses 15. Ruth becomes a prophetic picture, just like Miriam was, you know, a typology of Revelation chapter 12, a covenant woman, the womb, you know, the which lost the firstborn shall be redeemed by the son of Elohim, that is Yahushua HaMashiach. Fourth point, Boaz, the Yehudite who was also an Ephrathite, he is termed as a close relative of Elimelech. Boaz is two identities merged, a Yehudite tribe of Yehuda, the scepter, the king, the lion, Ephrathite, Joseph, Ephraim, Ristori, the birthright, the firstborn inheritance, the shepherd and stone. Uh, Ruth chapter 2 verses 1, and Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a great man of wealth of the clan of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Elimelech was from Ephraim, so it goes on to say that Boaz also was an Ephrathite as well as a Yehudite, right? But Elimelech was only an Ephrathite, not a Yehudite. So can you see this here? So that's the reason Boaz, through marriage with Ruth, all right, brings forth the covenant seed, David, who's both an Ephrathite as well as a Yehudite. When when I say David, obviously it goes on to say their son was Obed, and then in the lineage, in that same lineage, David was born. So when Boaz redeems Ruth, this happens spiritually, where Reuben lost, who is the lost firstborn. The birthright was given to Joseph, all right, through Ephraim. Yahudah kingship are merged in a single womb, and the seed born Obed, Ishai, David becomes the restored inheritance of all three lines. This is why David is rightly called Ben Haish Ha Ephrati. All right, me Bethlehem Yehuda, which means the son of Ephrathite man from Bethlehem of Yehuda, because Bethlehem is the place where Reuben lost firstborn blessing, Ephraim's birthright authority, Yehuda's royal scepter, all meet are reconciled. Ruth's womb, a symbolic of Reuben's failure, is redeemed by the seed of Yehuda Ephraim. The tribe that defied the father's bed is redeemed by the son who comes through her redeemed lineage. Reuben's prophetic name is fulfilled. See a son. Look, the son is born in Bethlehem through the restored womb of the Reubenite line. Her childbearing cleanses the tribe's ancestral defilement. Thus, Reuben's lost firstborn is restored in the son born in Bethlehem. So let's move on to the next one. Yahuah himself fulfilled the marriage pattern perfectly. The core claim is the original design was one wife, one covenant, one body. He became the seed of the woman, entered the covenant womb as promised child. We saw in Revelation chapter 12. Fulfilled 1 Timothy 2 verses 15, saved in childbearing. Point number two, Yasharal was divorced, Jeremiah 3:8, thus legally an adulteress. Deuteronomy 24 1 to 4 forbids returning to her first husband. Point number three, the same husband entered a second estate, incarnation, and through death. Alright, Romans chapter 7 verses 2 to 4 explains this mystery. The husband dies, woman now free, raised husband takes her again. Point number four, Messiah remarries his bride in resurrection. This fulfills the original Genesis 2:24 intent: one husband, one wife, one body, one flesh. Ephesians 5:31 to 32 confirms the Genesis marriage is only a picture of Messiah and the assembly. Yahuwah himself upheld the original creation design: one wife, one covenant, one flesh, one body. Now, this is the summary, which is a grand integration, the entire prophetic picture, the entire prophetic narrative from Genesis to Revelation reveals one unified picture. Yahuwah's covenant woman fell into adultery, walked a death path, cried, Altaskith, do not destroy, was redeemed by Yahusha through Genesis 3:15, restored as his wife through Genesis 2:24, Miktam engraved, transformed into Edukta, his testimony, protected Philadelphia, the assembly, brought through birth pangs, Revelation 12, and fully restored as one bride to one husband, the marriage supper of the Lamb. Complete sequential synthesis, creation and covenant marriage, Genesis 2:24, Yahuwah establishes one man and one woman as a covenant pattern. The woman is designed for covenant union, fruitfulness, and faithful companionship. This becomes a prophetic template for Yahuwah and Yasharel. Number 2, the fall and the curse. Genesis 3:15, the woman is deceived. The serpent takes authority. The promise of the seed of the woman begins redemption. This is the first prophecy of prophecy Yahusha must fulfill. Redeem the woman before restoring the marriage. Point number 3, polygamy enters through human sin. Multiple wombs, multiple rival seed lines. Abraham, Hagar brings forth Ishmael, persecutes Ishak. Jacob, Lee, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah brings forth seeds which hate Joseph and sell him. Yehuda, Tamar incident, the line saved only because Yahuwah sovereignly overrides sin through the Torah of the dead brother. All right, where Yehuda, though he is immoral, unknowingly fulfills the Torah of the dead brother. Kings forbidden to multiply wives and silver and gold, Deuteronomy 17:16 to 17. Solomon violates both wives, multiple wives, turns his heart to idolatry, kingdom splits. David's many wives, Ammon raping Tamar, who was a sister of Absalom, and then Adoniah, one of his other sons, also wants to rule and usurp the authority. Absalom also wants to usurp the authority. So David had multiple problems because of polygamy. Polygamy always destroys covenant order. Point number 4, the covenant woman Yasharel falls into adultery. Yasharel becomes the harlot wife. Hosea chapters 2 and chapters 3. Jeremiah chapter 3, Ezekiel chapter 16. Yahuwah divorces her for a time and sends her into exile. She mixes with foreign nations, 2 Kings 17, becoming unclean. She walks a death path, uncleanliness, idolatry, domination by foreign rulers. Point number 5, the Al-Taskit cry, do not destroy. Psalms 57, 58, 59, 75 contain this cry. David cries it when hunted. Yasharel cries it in exile. It is a covenant woman pleading, do not destroy me. The cry is rooted in fear, brokenness, and desperate appeal for mercy. Point number 6, hidden revelation, Miktam, which has a gematria value of 500, engraved golden truth. Miktam Psalms, engraved sealed golden Psalms. Miktam is equal to 500. These contain the secret heart of covenant restoration. Point number 7, transformation through teaching. Le Lemard, which has a gematria value of 104. Psalm 60 uniquely contains Edut, Miktam, Le Lamad. Through teaching, the engraved truth becomes the people's testimony. Point number 8, from Edut 480 to Edukta, your testimony, where Edut is 480, Edukta is 500. Once the Miktam is taught, it becomes your testimony. The covenant woman receives not only revelation but identity, holding her testimony. Right? And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, it says, right? So, the covenant woman. Point number 9, the Samaritan woman is the covenant woman restored. John chapter 4, 5. She had 5 husbands, broken Torah, 5 books. 6th man, carnal man, not her husband. 7th husband is Yahusha. She is redeemed, fulfilled in her encounter, Genesis 3:15, where She comes to a realization that she is part of covenant Yasharel, out of whom he is the Messiah. Yahusha reveals himself as the Messiah. I am he tells her. Okay, so that is the fulfillment for her to understand that he has come from the redeemed womb. He's come from the womb and redeeming the womb. All right. Then marriage restored, Genesis 2 verses 24. Point number 10, the crucial order, Genesis 3:15 to Genesis 2:24. Redemption must come before marriage is restored. Yahusha first crushes the serpent's head, redeems the woman, then reunites with his bride, marriage covenant restored. This solves the Deuteronomy chapter 24 divorce barrier. While the commandment is fulfilled spiritually, it will be also completed in its consummation at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then we saw Philadelphia, the restored wife, the assembly, Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 to 13. Little strength, kept my word, not denied my name, open door no one can shut. I will write my name on you, which is the engraving, Miktam. Philadelphia as the covenant woman, restored and sealed. Point number 12, Revelation 12, the travailing woman, she gives birth. Yahusha's coming through Yasharel. The dragon or the serpent persecutes. She flees into the wilderness. Hosea chapter 2, fulfill. The remnant keep commandments and have the testimony of Yahusha. That is Edut Yahusha, the testimony of Yahusha becomes her testimony. Point number 13, one husband, one wife, final restoration. Yahusha becomes the final eternal husband. The covenant woman becomes one bride, not multiple. Polygamy, chaos is ended forever, engraved with his name. Her testimony becomes his testimony. The bride is restored to one husband in eternal covenant. Entire picture is one continuous story. Genesis, Kings, Prophets, Gospels, Epistles, Revelation equals, and all talks about the husband redeems, restores, engraves, uh, restores identity, and rejoins his covenant wife to himself. So, this is all for today, my beloved brethren. I hope all this makes sense. So, uh, I I'm sorry I cannot place any link because this is based on a PowerPoint presentation. So I pray that you understand the order of Genesis 3:15 before Genesis 2:24 and realize your state and cry out as per the Altaskit in the wilderness. El, do not destroy. All right. Keep us as the apple of your eye, all right, and preserve us for the marriage supper of the Lamb, because we are betrothed as a chaste virgin to the bridegroom Yahusha, and he will come as the bridegroom to take us to be with him at the marriage supper of the Lamb. May Yahusha barak you. Shalom.